So, what we're going to do, I want to share a little word this morning because I knew we were going to do some reports like that one, and then I want to also share a report from Norway. We were in Norway on actually the last 2 Sundays previous to we left on the day before Friday or something like Friday, left on Friday and went to Norway. So I was booked to speak in Norway, and Eric and Lindsay were booked to lead some worship ministry. And then Janelle, our oldest daughter, said, Dad, can I come? And I said, Sweetie, if you can write the check, you can come. And so she said, yeah, I can. So she bought herself a ticket and she came along. But we went to Norway, and the idea was there were 3 conferences going on, and we were going to meet John and Carol in Norway. And let me just say right now, so my history, my personal genetic history is my mom is Norwegian, my dad's mostly German, but so I've got somebody asked me if I had any Mennonite in me, and I've just been adopted into a lot of Mennonite families, but I'm not Mennonite. But so on the one side, mom's full-on Norski, so but she's never been to Norway, and I'd never been to Norway before we started going there a few years ago. So this is my 3rd trip there, and we started to see things happen, more and more. We could start to see God's heart for the nation of Norway and what he really wanted to do. And so when we were there in the fall, we were there for the Revival Alliance conference. Most of you know that story. It was a conference with Bill was there, Bill Johnson, Cheyenne, Sue Ann, Heidi Baker, Roland Baker. It was like the Revival Alliance crew. And so we were there, and what I discovered was how powerful, you talk about mustard seeds and whatnot. So with all those speakers that were there in the fall, it wasn't like I was up speaking all the time. So previous to this, that trip was almost like a seed form trip. And so I was just up to basically prophesy and do some things, just do some ministry things. But in terms of actually getting up and doing 4 sessions or whatever like that, that wasn't happening. However, while I was there last time, Vision Norway, so it's the Christian TV station throughout Scandinavia, was broadcasting this conference or whatever. And as I was up sharing one night, there was a gal from a friend of ours, family, who's from Edmonton, and her mom lives in Sweden, and she was in Sweden. And while I was up prophesying on TV, she texts a good friend of mine, her husband, and says, "Is Trevor in Norway right now?" And this was in the fall, and so it was really cool. At that moment in time, I felt like the Lord said, I'm going to begin to accelerate the gospel of the kingdom message going out through media, through online, on the line, internet streaming and all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, so this time then we went back. That was the first thing, and John and I were talking and discussed it, saying we need to go back within 6 months or so and go back and strike the ground again, as it were. I know we had Bobby Connor here strike the ground. But anyway, so we felt to go back. It does feel like there's a real open door in Norway. Oh, and by the way, you should start praying into, this is not for me personally, but you should start praying into North Korea if you haven't been yet, because in the spirit, there's going to be a wide open door that it's already opening, but it's going to become so open to the gospel that miracles will fall off the fruit trees like you just flick the branch and it happens. I'm prophesying this, okay? You see, you watch in history what happened. Keith could attest to this. When the Iron Curtain fell, you guys went into Czech Republic shortly thereafter. And you'd go out on the streets and just start sharing Jesus on the streets, and the power of God would hit the place. There'd be bodies all over the ground, people getting healed, people getting saved. Because it's something like that when a place is locked up under religion and bondage for so long, and then all of a sudden the government opens the door and says, like it was just announced last week, he's open now to Christianity to come into North Korea. I don't know if y'all heard that or read that. Did anybody hear that or read that, So what that means, I just jumped in my heart. I'm like, come on. Part of me's like, let's go to North Korea, but I got to look to see if it's written in my book before we do that. But if you have a heart for Asia or the eastern places, okay, and if North Korea is on your scroll, just get ready, because there's an open door that's coming that, yeah. Whee! Has anyone ever had North Korea on their heart for ministry at all? Anybody? You've prayed into North Korea? From Chinese border, yeah? Anybody at all? I know, I thought of you guys, actually. I thought of you guys, because you guys have a word about going into nations that you kind of got to go in covertly and stuff. Wow. All right. Anyway, that's just a little nugget for you. But so with Norway, though, so we get to Norway, and it was quite a crazy ride over there. We don't need to get into that. But through canceled flights and flights that were extended, I'll tell you this story. This is kind of funny. We're flying over the Atlantic, and the flight attendants run to the front of the plane. They rush to the front of the plane, and there's a big commotion. Then the one comes back, and I say, "Excuse me." I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "Oh, there's a couple of unruly passengers we had to restrain up there. They were too intoxicated. They had to restrain them. So they're restrained in the front." And I'm going, "Okay, this isn't good." So now they got to determine whether they're going to fly back and kick them off the plane or not. Long story short, we keep on flying. I'm like, "Okay, good." Well, then all of a sudden, when we're halfway around across the Atlantic, they turn the plane and go all the way back to Newfoundland. So it added almost 5 hours to our trip, which kind of stunk. But I just really felt for those guys because it's on their dime. And it probably cost at least $20,000 each for them to do that. Yeah. Can you imagine that? Honey, I went on this trip, and the ticket was a little more than I expected. Anyway, so we get there, went in, and this was really cool. So we started out, we were ministering in Catch the Fire Oslo, which is a church. It's a Catch the Fire church, beautiful leaders that are there. And there was a lady sitting in the chairs. This lady got saved in the early 90s, and as soon as she got saved, the kingdom realm was just wide open to her. And they'd asked me to come. They wanted me to talk about the courts of heaven and accessing the kingdom realm, living out of that kingdom realm. And I was kind of, it was almost like I was trying to pack in about 5 messages into one, you know what I mean? And anyway, then afterward, I'm up there, and I'm going, in my head, I'm going, "Oh, this isn't even making sense. I'm just all over the map. This is so crazy." And in my head, I'm really struggling. And after we sit down, and Lindsay comes over, and she goes, "Trev, that's got to be one of the best messages I've ever heard you speak." And I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "It was so clear." I'm like, "Wow, it had to be God," because it felt like it was like, blah. So we'll get the recordings if you want to hear it. Was there a translator for that one? No, it was full on English, wasn't it? Yeah. Anyway, but they wanted to talk about the courts of heaven and all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, as I'm teaching or preaching, there's a lady in there in the crowd, and she got saved in the early 90s. And as soon as she got saved, see, there's a difference between the gospel of salvation and the gospel of the kingdom. The gospel of salvation speaks of, we receive salvation through faith in Christ, the forgiveness of our sin, and we get born again spiritually. But the gospel of the kingdom always includes everything in the kingdom, his kingdom, right? It always includes signs and wonders and miracles and heaven come and heaven being released through you and all these different things, you see? It's not just one thing about your spiritual condition, like my eternal spirit. You follow what I'm saying? So the gospel of the kingdom. So she was introduced to the gospel of the kingdom. She had radical encounters with the Lord. And then she got married shortly thereafter, and the relationship went south. She didn't really realize the man that she was about to marry, had a dark side to him, and the dark side manifested, and it was a very abusive thing. She had to separate from him for her own safety. So as soon as she went through that traumatic experience, everything in the kingdom locked down in her. And it's so wild, because it was like when she was born from above, what happened was her heart was completely free, and she was just enjoying an innocence of kingdom life. And then when she went through this traumatic experience, everything locked down. And she hadn't been through a process of even heart healing or, getting some hurts healed up. It was like she was just lost. Well, on that Sunday morning, as I'm preaching, she is getting lit. And I'm just like, I noticed her, like God kind of highlighted her to me, and she's just like, it's like she was being awakened again inside. And so she came up to me. Then we went to the conference, and we went to a different city about an hour away. Went to that conference, and there were only I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 people there. Like, it was just such a small crowd. And part of me saying, "Really?" Like, I get it. Like, we were expecting, because when we were told, they said there's going to be this is going to happen, and this is what it's going to look like, and that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, man, the marketing ball got dropped on this one, didn't it? You know what I mean? And so anyway, we're sitting there, but then just before I got up to speak, the guy comes to me and he goes, just remember, he said, even though there's only 40 people here, there's 150,000 watching on TV. And because they were filming all the sessions and whatnot. So we got to preach to, in the whole time we were there, we probably hit at least 600,000 people with the message of the gospel of the kingdom. And it was just wild. And so and this lady, she came to the meetings and she was just excited about what God was saying and doing. We had a great time, and it was very good. Here's what I'm at this point though in my life right now where of course we rejoice with healings. We rejoice with people getting healed and getting set free. But what really, really cranks me up is when I see a lady like this. She came up later and she goes, when you talked on the Sunday morning, something was awakened inside of me. And all of a sudden I started seeing again. I started to experience the kingdom again. All this stuff that was locked down has just come alive in me again. And she began to share testimonies then. And there were some miracle testimonies and things like that had already happened since we preached on the Sunday. And she shared this story with me the following Saturday. Are you hearing what I'm saying? And here's the deal. The message that I was sharing, a big part of it was this. We all know that he who joins himself with the Lord is one spirit with him. So when you get born again, there's a oneness that takes place with the Lord. You with me on that? So we've heard this and we've understood this. That oneness revelation, it's an experience. It's a revelation that comes when you realize that I'm in him and he's in me, and I'm in my Father is in me, we are one, and we will come and make our home with you, and that you would be one even as we are one, John 17 talks about. And so we see this story there, and that's what happens at salvation. But then there's something beyond just oneness, and this is really what I took away from, and I've heard many testimonies from people with our weekend of Justin Abraham, was that even the concept of just oneness is a great concept. But then to live out that oneness every day, realizing that I'm in him and he's in me, that's what we would call union, So discovering your union with him. You follow what I'm saying? So even oneness is it's almost like an event. I get born again and I'm made one in him. He's made me alive in him. If you want some scriptures this morning, I was going to go through all these, but you can read them on your own. Go to Romans chapter 6. Read through Romans chapter 6. You'll see in there where it talks about how his death was my death. His burial was my burial, and his resurrection is my resurrection. It's talking about a oneness thing. But where we want to step into fruitfulness, and we want to see fruit expand, and we want to see fruit happen, that comes through walking in the awareness of where you are seated and where you really are. That's the union part of it. So are you following what I'm saying? So if you want to say it like this, I would say oneness is almost like an event that takes place when you get born again, born from above. But recognizing and walking out that oneness, I'm just calling it, you can call it whatever you want, but that's recognizing my union. And so what's really rattled me lately is songs that we sing or prayers that I pray or things that I say that would divorce that thought of union with him. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So what happens is this lady was awakened into this place where she once was. Well, she always was, but it was awakened in her again. And she's like, why have I not been living in that? And then as soon as she put her attention and focus on Jesus in that way, where I'm in him and he's in me, all of a sudden, all the fruit started happening again in her life. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So a lot of our theology is event-based, at least mine anyway, has been event-based, I'm believing for a mighty move of God to sweep the face of the earth. I believe in the end-time harvest. I believe in that, and I believe we're in that. But I'm not waiting for an event to take place. I am the event. You are the event. The event takes place when we start living as children, the children that we truly are. So when I start living like the son that I am, I begin to manifest his kingdom all over around me. When I live in that place, that's when harvest happens. So think about it. If everyone that calls Catch the Fire Winnipeg their place, their home, okay? Think about it if just us as Catch the Fire Winnipeg, We flew a little higher. We soared above circumstance and things that would try to distract us from our awareness of being in Him and living in Him and moving in Him and having our being in Him. Just think about that. You know, it was said in pre-service prayer that, you know, it gets cloudy and then the rain starts happening and that kind of thing. But the farmers and me personally really needed the rain. I really am thankful for the rain, because just before we left, we sowed a bunch of grass seed, and it's like, okay, we need to water this. So Mel's actually responsible for all the rain. If you don't like the rain, talk to her, because she's out watering. I said, "Hun, you're gonna have to keep this, like, the ground has to be wet for like a few weeks now, so the seed will take and it'll really grow." So she's out there watering it, and she says, "Lord, can you do this for me?" That night it started raining, and it's rained every night almost since then, at least at our place anyway. It's just been raining every night, so it's been great. We shut off, not that we have a water bill, it's a well, but the issue is just getting out and moving the sprinkler, right? So anyway, but here's the deal. Even if it's raining in your life, like in a dark, cloudy place, I want to tell you the sun is always shining. I love that about airplanes, you know. You could be in a place where it's cloudy and it's like, oh, it's kind of dark and depressing here right now in this level right here. Well, you hop on the airplane and the airplane pokes through. It might be a little rough getting there, but it pokes through and you get into the sun. You're like, whoa, the sun is shining. The sun's always shining. I really feel like the Lord wants us to live like the sun is shining. Fly higher, you know, like come up here. Sit where you're already seated. Right? We talked about this a few weeks ago. What you carry is far greater than what you'll encounter. And Jesus carried something called peace. He is the Prince of Peace. So he wasn't rattled when the storm came. He's sleeping in the boat. And then he says to the boys, he gets up and he goes, "Why didn't you do something about it?" In other words, like, the ball's in your court, you know. Don't wait for an event. You carry what this storm needs. So anyway, so Norway was really good, very powerful. Oh, this is another highlight. We've been talking about, we did a 3-week series, maybe 2 months ago, about shame, fear, and control, and about heart issues and that sort of thing. Well, the lady and gentleman who birthed that ministry and really were given that revelation firsthand and have written about it and ministered literally to thousands around the world by it are Betsy and Chester Kilstra. And so they're now in their late 70s, and they're this sweet little couple from North Carolina. Well, guess who was at the conference too? Betsy and Chester Kilstra. And I said, "I'm so glad to see you. I want to talk to you guys." So we chatted and stuff. And by the way, they're going to come to Winnipeg at some point, and they're going to spend some time with us and just pour out. I've never sat in a meeting where somebody so gently and beautifully just addressed hard issues and seen so many people set free in like a period of maybe 45 minutes or something. I'm just sitting there going, whoa, and God's showing me stuff. I'm like, oh, Jesus, yeah. And it's just it's beautiful. You're going to absolutely love them. But what they carry in God is so crazy. And a highlight for me, because I always love to see other people that I love to see them step into greater destiny, you know. And so they came up to Eric and Lindsay, and they walked over there and they said, "Would it be okay if we laid hands on you and imparted to you every good thing that we carry?" So Eric and Lindsay are sitting there and they're crying, and then there's Betsy and Chester, and they release this blessing and start praying over them in this impartation, and then they start prophesying, which is really cool, because the prophecy was about, and I'm not even sure if they'd seen or heard you lead worship yet, but the prophecy was about worship and healing, and healing heart and healing bodies and all healing that flows through worship and stuff. And they said how it's going to look differently. Like, it's not just always clinical, sit down, tell me your story, we go through a list. Like, God's going to do something supernaturally through worship, which is really cool, which brings me to the third highlight, which was on the night that we left. We were headed to the airport that night, and we met with this family. I've known them for several years now. Dear, beautiful family. And they're kingdom business people, so they have business. And I've never met anyone who has such a big heart for the kingdom and for business. Like, everything that we have is God's, you know what I mean? they have a project. It's a development project, and it's 1,000 acres. So I don't know if you all know farmer. 1,000 acres is it's quite a few. How many sections is 1,000 acres, Doug? Yeah, so it's about a section and a half, 6 quarters of land. They're about 6.5 quarters of land, and they're developing this. It's over a probably 20 to 25 year project. It's a multi-billion-dollar project, and we prayed into stuff with them before, Keith and I, and that sort of thing. But that night, I said they had some roadblocks. They've had extreme breakthroughs already, but I said, well, why don't we go into heaven and see heaven's perspective on this? Would it be cool if we did that? And they jumped at it. So we met with the family in the house, and I said to Eric and Lindsay, I said, why don't we practice? I said, are you guys okay if we experiment? And they're like, yeah, okay. And so I said, why don't we practice about that prophecy, how healing and breakthrough is going to come through worship? So instead of approaching the courts of heaven and getting justice from the heavenly judge, as we maybe used to, I said, why don't we experiment and let's just worship and see what God would open up and stuff. And so we started to worship, and it was like everyone in the room just went whoop, and we were just in and seeing and repenting and declaring and prophesying, and it was so easy and so free. And I just got a text from Torshell yesterday, texted me saying that thank you so much, it was so delightful. There's already been breakthrough that happened within the government. The issue was some government hang-ups on the project going forward. So it was absolutely amazing. So does anybody have Norway on their scroll? Anyone have a call to Norway? Yeah? Yeah? Cool. Anybody else? I'm not going to call you up and pray for you or talk to you or anything. I'm just curious to know, because I know there's in the future there could be teams that would go. I know we had some other people that were interested but just couldn't make it happen this time. So let's do this in closing. Take your Bibles to Ephesians chapter 5. There's so much good stuff I want to talk about. We just don't have the time to do it right now. But I am going to close with this. All right, where are you? There we go. Ephesians chapter 5, pick it up in verse 8. It says this, it says, for you were once in darkness. Actually, let me rephrase that. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Wow. That's kind of wild. That's probably NASB, but I'd encourage you to go and read the original language. You can do that online, see what it really says. But anyway, you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord, having nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It's shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. Verse 13, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. This is why it is said, and this is the big piece, number 14 here. Wake up, O sleeper. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise but wise. And then verse 16, some translations say, redeeming the time, which is one of my favorites, but in this particular one here, it says this. It says, therefore, do not be foolish. Understand hang on, back up the book. Be very careful then, verse 15, how you live, not as unwise, but wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil, okay? So other translations say, redeem the time, okay? And I feel like the Lord is saying this to us as a church. I think it's a global call, but I really feel like God's saying this, guys, wake up. Wake up. And so what does it mean to redeem the time? To redeem time means to purchase out from another, to take back what is rightfully yours. And the word there for time is kairos, which is the appointed time, the now time of God. So some people have a belief system that God's timing will always just happen, and there is a sovereignty of God aspect. Absolutely, God is sovereign, and things happen, and God puts things in motion. He opens doors no man can close, and he closes doors no man can open, right? But we got to choose to seize that doorway and step into it when it comes across our path. So I believe that's a connection to where he says, wake up, recognize the time. Okay, recognize, he says, and then he says, redeem the time. Take back the time. Seize the time. Seize that kairos time, that now moment in God. Take hold of it. And the season that I believe we're in, I believe that God is saying to us as a church, it's time to wake up and seize the kairos time. What time is it? It's harvest time. It's absolutely harvest time. It's been harvest time since Jesus said the fields are white. It's been that time. It's discipleship time. It's kingdom time. It's like this morning we sat at the table and said, whatever you want to eat, just go ahead and eat as much as you want. And I feel like there's a call in the Spirit to the church today too, saying, guys, it's time for you just to go for it, arise and shine. Take hold of the time. Take back the time. Time that you thought was lost. You thought that, well, I missed that opportunity. Well, you can redeem the time. Take it back. Come on. You can't redeem time if you're still sleeping. That's why he said, wake up. So he said, wake up. Wake up. Get a revelation. Redeem the time. So I said this too, I've said this before, but every new day begins in darkness. When you wake up in the morning, you might think, oh, it's morning. But guess what? It's already been morning for hours. So you shouldn't say, Lord, I want to see better. I want to see. You should say, Lord, change my perception. Because there's a difference between what you see and how you perceive things. So if you begin to wake up and redeem the time, you got to perceive things a little differently. See, when we just perceive things, like look at the story of Peter. Peter's out going to go walk on the water, and it says that when he looked and perceived or thought about what was going on around him, he began to sink. And Jesus is like, hey, buddy, come here. Look at me. And as soon as and Jesus was right there, he just reached out and grabbed him. But it was like that. He was back up again. And then he said, you didn't have to doubt. Why did you doubt? You didn't have lasting faith. You didn't have long faith, Your faith wasn't lasting. And I feel like God's saying that to us right now. We need to wake up. He's waking us up so that we could see, so that we could redeem time. We could take back time. What I thought maybe I missed, or, well, maybe I kind of missed that. No. Listen, it's never too late with the Lord. You can redeem the time. Part of this harvest thing is, I'm so excited, and I'll just close with this, but you can mark your calendars on the last weekend of June, I believe it is. I better check what's the weekend after Father's Day? 24th, there you go. We have with us, when we were, and you've heard me talk a bit about a man in India, a pastor in India, dear friend of Edward and Diane's, and Finial, and his wife's name is Shishmita. And so I've shared the story. Finial's the guy who Jesus comes up and he appears at the end of his bed and talks to him about his day and what's going to happen and stuff. 3 to 5 times a week, Jesus just shows up in the early morning and talks to him and shares some things. And it's just really funny, I think. And so anyway, but literally I hear from him. I don't know if this, I think it probably does to you too, Edward, but he emails me at least 5 times a week. Like it's like, wow. But and then he's always sending pictures. Okay, this person got saved. This woman here was completely demonized. We cast out so many demons that look at her now. She's full of the glory of God. And all these things in their church, there's a phenomenon in their church that they've established, and that is that everyone that's in their church has either gotten saved through some kind of dramatic encounter with Jesus, or through some kind of miraculous healing or breakthrough, or through crazy deliverance or anything, something like that. What I'm saying is, this guy embodies the message of the kingdom, and he embodies what I'm talking about, living in union with the Lord. And he's going to be with us. They're going to be with us in a few weeks. And I really feel that it's strategic into the season that God's leading us into. Because we love it, when people find a home at Catch the Fire, and some have come from other churches or this or that, or some weren't going to church or whatever. But the season is upon us to arise and shine, that your light would just go forth in the world. You are light, because he's in you and you're in him, that you would shine and nations would come to your light. These are. Wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be fun to have a church that we're so busy looking after and discipling new converts and new people and people that are just encountered the kingdom for the first time? Wouldn't that be exciting? Yeah. And I said this like probably a year ago or so. You need to make room in your life for what God wants to do, because your life, your priorities might have to shift. What are you going to do when you have like 4 or 5 people that are new in Christ and they're looking to you to feed them and disciple them? What's going to happen? What's your wife going to look like? Your life going to look like? Your wife, what's she going to look like? Well, she's going to look really good, thanks. What's your life going to look like? Because God's saying, listen, if I'm in you and you're in me and your life is truly mine, your life is not your own, your life is mine, then you're going to have to give it away like Petra was talking about earlier. Come into the end of yourself. I don't know what to do. And I just want to say this. The more you get involved in the harvest of the kingdom, the less the issues of your life are going to matter. Your focus is going to be on, wow, we got stuff to do here. We got things to do. You know what? I appreciate that, but we're focused on something here. And it's seeing his kingdom expand.